Welcome, Dolphins fans, haters, and everyone in between to your favorite show discussing the greatest franchise in sports, the Miami Dolphins. This is the PhinsPod. My name is Moose, your host, and since we looked at the Dolphins' offensive makeup earlier this week, we're going to be looking at the other side of the ball, which carried the overall team and fortified their identity throughout the season, their defense. Obviously, when Brian Flores was brought in here, it was due to his leadership characteristics and his overall prowess as a leader of men, but it was as well as his developing his defensive game plans. Oh boy, have we seen the evolution of that. And for the first time since the early days of Zach Thomas and Jason Taylor mixing it up with Patrick Surtain and Sam Madison, we actually have a defense which can win us games. We saw it firsthand this past season. So today, we will be talking about the specific players who helped make it happen and determine their value going forward. We already saw how the Dolphins determined some of their players' values this past week. We're going to get into that. As always, be sure to take a moment and hit that subscribe button wherever it is you're listening, and follow us if you're listening on Spotify. Make sure you're connecting with us on all platforms just to make sure you don't miss a thing that we come out with. And before we get started, I'd really appreciate it if you could leave a review as well. Without further ado, let's dive in.
What's with the Tua distaste? Is that prevalent in South Florida because they saw that he struggled, or what is the general sense of Dolphins fandom as you live down there and sense it, Jeff?
Yeah, I think that there's actually more patience locally than maybe it feels like nationally. I think there's a sense down here. In fact, it's interesting to me. There's a pretty strong contingent of fans that when you bring up Deshaun Watson and what they'd have to give up, to get him, that get pretty defensive for Tua. So I understand nationally the narrative definitely is that, can he really handle it? The Dolphins should upgrade. But I do think that I sense that this is a group down here that kind of saw enough potential to where they feel like he deserves at least another year to kind of grow into the role.
Yeah, my gosh. The guy had his hip reattached, right? I know I'm exaggerating. But then
Sure.
then he's drafted by the team that wanted him all along. They move him along pretty darn fast. I guess what would be his high water mark? Was it that game against Kyler Murray where he was so dynamite on the road? Is that what it was?
Yes,
and
no question.
Right?
No question.
And then, let's give him a shot. Give him a couple more weapons and see how it goes. I would think, unless Deshaun Watson strolls along, then I would pull the trigger on that in a heartbeat.
Right.
That's just my 2 cents.
So I don't even think, Rich, we'd be having the conversation if not for the Watson potential availability. I don't think it's a conversation with, the Russell Wilson stuff. Like, you don't see Dolphins fans getting up about that. The idea of a 25-year-old elite quarterback and Deshaun Watson being potentially available and seemingly having the ammunition to be able to make it happen, I think is what creates that intrigue. But otherwise, we would be saying, it was his first year. By the way, towards the end of the season, all of his wide receivers were hurt. He had no running backs. He really wasn't working with very much. I do understand both sides of it. This is an organization that has been a bit snake bitten, to say the least. Watching Ryan Tannehill get comeback player of the year while you're also trying to develop your young quarterback. There's a lot going on down here. There's a lot of angst that these people have gone through when it comes to that QB spot.
So right off the bat, we're starting with Eguavoen Howard. He finished the season with 10 interceptions, 40 tackles, and 20 passes deflected. It was clear he was the best player on both sides of the ball for the Dolphins. It was shocking that Byron Jones was getting paid that much more, considering just the elite level that we were seeing Eguavoen Howard play as. And again, he was a Chris Greer draft pick, I believe a second-round pick. At the time, he was a raw athlete. No one really knew what he could develop into. And give credit to the Dolphins coaching staff and mainly Eguavoen Howard. Throughout the years, he has found a way to find that next level in his game and become a true shutdown corner. And we saw that this year. We saw glimpses of it. Dolphins fans, if you're paying attention over the last few years, Eguavoen Howard, whenever he's been able to stay healthy, which has been the problem early on in his career, but whenever he was able to stay healthy, he was a dominant force on the outside. And this year, that came to fruition with 10 interceptions. Opposite him, the highest paid corner on his team and the big free agent addition, Byron Jones. Jones did not have a bad year by any means. Finished with 2 interceptions, 28 tackles, and 4 passes defended. Byron Jones didn't look to be as dominant as you would want, but he seemed to do the part. I mean, the Dolphins defense still was able to hold opposing quarterbacks to a pretty low QBR compared to the rest of the league. So Byron Jones, clearly not a liability on the outside, but I definitely think there's a higher level of his play, and that's definitely exciting looking at the potential of the defense going forward. In the nickel position, Nick Needham played. He was, again, an undrafted free agent, I believe, out of Nevada, University of UNLV, one of those schools. But he came out, and he really earned a spot last year for the Dolphins, and this season came in and cemented himself as that starting nickel corner. And he had 2 interceptions, 36 tackles, and 7 passes defended. You know, he played specifically in that slot corner position and in nickel packages, and he was never really tested on the outside, and I think there's a reason for that. The Dolphins coaching staff saw what he was like on the outside, and they just felt that his skill set was best suited on the interior. Unfortunately, at times, I feel like we noticed Nick Needham get burned. He had some good games, but the Dolphins could upgrade at that position because if they're able to take out opposing offensive slot guys, that would just really help them shut down the opposing offense's overall attack as well. And Nick Needham, although he showed flashes, he did struggle at times. So at least adding some competition. And ideally, hey, maybe some of that competition could come from Noah Igbinoghene. He was the Dolphins' 3rd and final first-round pick last year when they traded back with the Green Bay Packers, who, remember, they took Jordan Love. The Dolphins took Noah Igbinoghene. He finished the season with just 11 tackles with 2 passes defended. And out of all of Miami's draft picks, including the later round picks, Iggy was by far the most disappointing. However, listen, corner is not a position that can be evaluated after just 1 year. It just can't. So he has all the physical tools. And when we did see him, he did get burned, as we talked about. So you really do hope that this year he grows and develops into a contributing force on the outside. And this offseason could be huge for him. Remember how young he is. And that's where he's going to be. He's going to be on the outside. The team did have a chance to give him reps at nickel, but it appeared that Flores and Boyer really wanted him to develop over time on the boundary. And remember, when asked who the toughest corner he faced was, Devonta Smith, you know, everyone's love until I guess a couple weeks ago. But when asked the toughest corner he faced in college, he himself stated that it was Noah Igbinoghene. That has to mean something. So look, is it a need or are we good there? It's not an extreme need at all. Obviously, Miami will look to find young corners who could develop into eventual starters and replace these really expensive guys that they have later on in their contracts, if they're able to find adequate guys to replace them. And that's something that's likely going to be done in practice and over the course of a season rather than on game day. We're still going to see Xavier Howard and Byron Jones. I highly doubt, barring injury, of course, that anyone is going to be taking reps away from Xavier Howard and Byron Jones. Moving forward to the safety position, we have Eric Rowe, who finished the season a good season, 66 tackles, 2 interceptions, with 11 passes deflected. Eric Rowe has had a resurgence since he joined the Dolphins. And if you remember, when he first signed, it was as a cornerback. Brian Flores and Eric Rowe, and give him credit, he adapted and he realized he was a better fit as a safety in this defense, and that way his skill set was maximized. And at strong safety, he gets to clean up plays on the back end and match up with offensive players such as tight ends or physical wideouts, people he can really stick with and prevent from getting the ball. And not only does he match up, but he also just neutralizes them. And yes, he did still struggle against guys like Darren Waller and Travis Kelce, but for the most part, you do like what you see out of Rowe. And again, those are guys like Darren Waller and Travis Kelce. They're the best of the best. So if you can't get the best safety in the NFL, you're not going to stop the best tight ends. So the fact that he's able to stop pretty much everyone else, I'm happy with his overall production. Next, we have the starting free safety, Bobby McCain. He finished the season with 39 tackles, 1 interception, and 5 passes defended. I will say, if you compare this year to 2019, the amount of tackles the safeties had is heavily reduced, and I really like to see that because that means that less and less plays are being taken to that second level where the safeties are responsible for cleaning it up. Back in 2019, early on, as you know, plays really tended to get to the second level pretty quick. So guys like Bobby McCain were required to make those tackles, and when they often failed, those big highlight plays against us happened. The Ravens game comes to mind. But Bobby McCain was much maligned when he transitioned to free safety from his previous spot as that slot corner, what Nick Needham eventually replaced. Not only was Bobby excellent in the nickel when he was there, but his struggles at free safety were apparent back in 2019, and there was a concern heading into the 2020 season about how it would translate. However, McCain was not a liability for the most part this season. He was actually a leader who kept the defense aligned properly and prevented big plays from happening. However, he is relatively expensive, and the front office may want to upgrade for a similar or even lower cost. But if you do remember that play, I don't recall what game, I believe it might have been the Chiefs game, when he went out due to a concussion protocol issue and Clayton Fedulum had to go in. That was when the big play occurred. That's when the miscommunication happened. So Bobby McCain absolutely has value in this defense. But as awesome as Bobby has been, no one in this league is safe, unfortunately. So we saw Kyle Van Noy get cut, so who knows what could happen in this league if they do find a cheaper or younger option that they think has a higher ceiling. Speaking of younger and cheaper options, Brandon Jones, a rookie from last year, he finished the year with 41 tackles, a forced fumble, and 1 pass defended. He was a mid-round pick, as I said, and he turned out to show some real promise as a player. He showed explosiveness on the football field and a knack for being around the ball. If you remember, he forced that fumble against Cam Newton in Miami. That was a really good play. It showed a lot. And he had some other heads-up moments, and he caused many other moments of you to be like, hey, this guy could develop. He's kind of athletic. He seems to be around the ball a lot. However, he's limited physically, similar to McCain. He's not as small. He seems to be a little thicker. So some competition may still be brought in, though, between Brandon Jones and someone else to come in at free safety, if Bobby McCain is replaced. So is safety a need? The Dolphins could look to upgrade the free safety spot, as we spoke about. However, I don't see the Dolphins overextending themselves and really paying a guy maybe like Malik Hooker. I just don't think teams are going to really vie for safeties this offseason just because the draft is pretty deep and the market is pretty good as well. So maybe they could get someone cheaper, but if someone like Malik Hooker is expensive, they probably won't throw money at them, or someone like Justin Simmons if he manages to break free from Denver. Moving on to the linebacker position, we got Jerome Baker. He finished the season with 70 tackles, 7 sacks, and 2 forced fumbles. Other than Xavier Howard, probably the best season, and Emmanuel Ogbah, who we'll get to. He's going to be up for a contract at the end of this upcoming season, so Miami's probably going to want to lock him up. And this year is going to be probably big in determining that, unless they decide to get that done early. I'm not entirely sure. I wouldn't be shocked if they waited to give the whole year to see what type of linebacker he is. Although if he does have another great year and is at least productive, even if you don't believe he's worth the money, he's going to get that money elsewhere. So maybe it does make sense, and it would behoove the Dolphins to extend Baker. And the reason that they might want to spend some of that money is because they recently acquired that from Kyle Van Noy, who's obviously no longer a member of the team. But that doesn't mean we're not going to be looking at his production. We're definitely not going to ignore it. He had 46 tackles and 6 sacks with 2 forced fumbles. He did a lot of the dirty work for the Dolphins. And in this scheme, you need somebody on the weak side of the play to hold the edge and protect the boundary of your defense. And Kyle Van Noy was that piece. He could drop back and take away some short stuff and routes to the flat, and he could rush the passer as well if he needed to. Not great, but he could try. And he was the oldest Dolphins defender, so the move to release him does mean that they should be going younger at the position. And it's going to be exciting to see who replaces him. And that first name on the list, Andrew Van Ginkel, 29 tackles, 5.5 sacks, and 3 forced fumbles. I know we spoke about him in the last episode. He's just a playmaker, and he's evolved into someone that Miami can rely on and potentially build around. And that's not a joke. Give Chris Greer credit for what he's been able to do thus far, considering that Kinky Ginky was taken out of Wisconsin again out of the 5th round. Landon Roberts, 33 tackles, 1.5 sacks, and a forced fumble. He is a thumper. And Miami's defense does have a rule which calls for a guy who can go plug up the A or B gap between the defensive tackle just to stop any run plays from popping to that second level, or at least occupy an interior lineman for another defender to clean up that play. For an upgrade, though, in terms of the draft, the ideal is obviously a guy like Micah Parsons, someone who could replace Landon Roberts. But there are others as well. Many others which we will get into in the coming weeks as we get into draft talk. Sam Eguavoen is the other linebacker, definitely an interesting guy. Remember, he was signed from the CFL. He finished the season with just 5 tackles, more of a special teams guy, and there is some promise with him, but the coaches don't fully trust him clearly because he's been here for now 2 seasons, and he doesn't really seem to see the field much, but he does stay on the roster, so does that mean something? Maybe, he just can't beat the guys out ahead of him, but regardless, he's definitely good enough to keep around for some competition. So is linebacker a need, or are we good? Well, now it seems to be a need. Miami needs to improve their depth if they want their defense to remain in the top 5. They have guys like Jerome Baker as well as Van Ginkel, but now with the loss of Van Noy, they really could use some depth on the outside as well as the inside of the front 7, especially if they lose a guy like Roberts, although maybe they will use some of that money to re-sign a Landon Roberts, who showed growth in the defense, although I didn't really like the signing. Having watched the Patriots play, Landon Roberts wasn't someone they were eager to bring back, and I think there was reason for that. And I think we saw moments, he kind of, his feet are kind of cemented in the ground. He kind of can't stick with shifty runners out of the backfield. Definitely tough in coverage, and especially, when he's one-on-one, if there's a runner out on the edge, I just don't like my chances. But he did show he can be a bullet in the run game. If the run game is between the tackles, or, you get a good time blitz with a guy like Landon Roberts, then game over. So he does have some upside there, and if Miami can coach him up and put him in good positions and put him in positions to succeed, maybe bringing him back on a good deal isn't the worst. So starting on the edge, Emmanuel Ogbah. He finished the season with 25 tackles and 9 sacks, leading the team. He had 3 forced fumbles as well. He started off the year extremely hot, and his fit in the defense looked clear. He seemed to be a true gem. He was making appearances on the Peter King podcast, and it looked like he could be getting his first Pro Bowl nod. But he cooled down. Hopefully there was just a nagging injury throughout the season or something like that, and he can enter year 2 with Miami better than the first, which would be awesome if he can hit that double-digit sack number. Speaking of high expectation prospects brought in for the Dolphins, Shaq Lawson, brought in from Buffalo, former first-round pick. He finished the season with 17 tackles, 4 sacks, and a forced fumble. So he did have some production in terms of sacks. He was a big defensive free agent acquisition for the Dolphins other than Byron Jones. Unfortunately, he did not seem to make the impact down the stretch that we would like to see. But by no means, like I said, was he bad. He was able to set the edge consistently, helped us stop the run, and the only issue I had was just some inconsistency in the pass rush. I'd love to see a breakout season for Lawson in year 2. By no means do I expect him to go anywhere. And remember, he was a first-round pick, so there is a lot of talent. And he has all the potential physically and all the tools in the world. He's agile, bendy, powerful, wide, long, and really aggressive as a player. Someone you definitely want on your side. All the things you want in a player, and hopefully it can all click. Our big boys, there's some promising talent on the interior as we move along on the defense. We have Christian Wilkins, who finished the season with 28 tackles, 1.5 sacks, and an interception. Christian Wilkins is someone that you build this defense around. He's an anchor in the middle. He's able to allow everyone else to make plays because he's stopping so much from happening in the middle, preventing so much from developing by his presence in the interior. So Christian Wilkins has definitely developed and hopefully continues to develop into a great defensive tackle. And speaking of great development, Zach Sieler finished the season with 30 tackles and 3.5 sacks. Remember, Miami signed him to that extension, which was a great move for them, considering how young he is, considering where he is in his arc, and how we really could be getting him, at his best for pretty cheap going forward. So Zach Sieler, really a great 1-2 punch with Wilkins, and another guy thrown in the mix there, Raekwon Davis. Raekwon Davis finished the season with 19 tackles. Very excited by what you saw out of him. Completely understand why Flores was so enthusiastic when the Dolphins took him in the second round. He is so powerful at the point of attack. Just physically looking at him, he is a man's man. He is so hard to move off of the line. And for a defense, and for the Dolphins specifically, he helps in so many ways. You can use him as a decoy on stunts. You can send pressure right behind him just because he takes up so much room, and he's so powerful and is pushing so hard up the middle that by sending someone else up there, you cause a lot of mayhem up in the center. And you can move him across the line too. He can become one of the top defensive linemen in the league. No cap. I'll repeat, I really think Raekwon Davis can become one of the top defensive linemen in the league. Then you have guys who may or may not return. You guys like Davon Godchaux, who we've pretty much heard is likely not coming back. Vince Beagle, who might get a chance now that Van Noy is gone. But go get your money, boys. Either way, Beagle's able to sign a bigger deal. Even though he's coming off the injury, he does have potential there. And he did show something good on film at the end of 2019. Davon Godchaux definitely, I think, is going to be able to get a deal elsewhere. And look, the only one who could really return, like I said, is Beagle. He did tear his ACL during training camp, so I think he's been working with the Dolphins trainers. So no other team's probably going to want to take a shot on someone, especially under these COVID circumstances with the reduced cap. And for that reason, the Dolphins may be his only suitor, and he can come back on the veteran minimum to compete for a shot at a longer-term deal. And that would be the best case for the Dolphins. They get a guy, really hungry, coming in there, really trying to earn a spot, and it'll come out best for the Dolphins. And then you have some young developmental guys who may be given chances going forward, but it really just depends on what they produce. And specifically, we're talking about last year's fifth-round draft selection out of UNC, Jason Strowbridge. Strowbridge saw some action late in the season as well. So is the edge position a need? Yes. The Dolphins' defense will elevate with the addition of a real pass rusher, and we saw flashes of that when Emmanuel Ogbah was balling out in the middle of the year. Do you remember the line's performance against the Rams and the Jets? The way the line and the overall defense looked because of it against the Chargers and the Niners? I doubt that will be done on the open market, considering the top-tier edge guys will be out of the Dolphins' budget. They're not going to go find these edge rushers to elevate them on the open market. I think they're hoping that this development comes from within, that guys like Van Ginkel and Ogbah and Lawson develop, and they're able to create blitz packages with Jerome Baker and create packages with a safety that they're able to bring in, and hopefully there's someone that we don't know about that's going to come in and elevate this defense. However, they could also find guys in that second wave of free agency or earlier in the draft. So now that we've gone through each position on the defensive side of the football and done a brief assessment of how things shake out as of right now, how do we want to rank these positions of need for Miami's defense this offseason? If a Landon Roberts walks in free agency, which is likely, then I believe that linebacker is likely the position in need of the most attention. And the main reason for that is not because I don't believe the talent that currently stands, but with the loss of Kyle Van Noy, the Dolphins scheme really does rely on having linebackers who are versatile in their ability to defend both the run and the pass. And in order to do that effectively, you need to not only have good talent, but fresh legs on the field, which can keep up with athletes on the offensive side of the ball. And having this healthy rotation of linebackers who can all come in and contribute is going to go a long way in keeping Miami's defense stout late in games. And second for Miami after linebacker, defensive end. The Dolphins need to create more pressure off of the edge and force opposing quarterbacks to make hurried throws. We have all the secondary, all the secondary players needed to capitalize on those mistakes that quarterbacks will make if under duress. And like we talked about, whether this is addressed in the draft or via free agency, I don't care. I don't give a damn. Just get me someone who can strike fear into the hearts of quarterbacks across the league. We need this era's Cam Wake. Like, if we could just, I feel so bad that Cam Wake had to play for such atrocious teams back in the teen 2000s, like 2000 teens. So sad. Imagine if we had a guy like Cam Wake right now in his prime. That's exactly who we need. And hopefully Emmanuel Ogbah can take that role. I mean, it would behoove the Fins to go out and try to find all the lottery tickets that they can, find guys with high upside that can develop. But Emmanuel Ogbah, you're wearing number 91. I think that number should be retired. I found it atrocious that they gave it away so fast. I think Cameron Wake deserved his number to be retired. That's a separate little rant. But if you're going to wear it, then earn it. So I really do hope Emmanuel Ogbah, we're all rooting for him. I do hope the best for that development. But, wearing 91, let's get it, man. My next need, I would say, is safety. Upgrading the free safety position will allow for more coverability on the back end, and although Bobby McCain serves this role admirably, there's never anything wrong with looking for improvements across the roster, or at the very least some healthy competition. And although we're at the point in the list where the need is not nearly as pressing, like linebacker needed, pass rusher probably needed, safety doesn't seem to be as needed. I would not be surprised, though, if Miami does roll into the season with pretty much the same room of guys, with perhaps only a few new kids in the form of undrafted free agents in the back end, but Brandon Jones, Bobby McCain, Eric Rowe, Clayton Fedulum, Kavon Frazier, maybe he walks, maybe he comes back, but definitely I would expect seeing most of the guys return. Fourth on the list, I would say, is defensive tackle. And despite having to potentially let Devon Godchow go, Miami is in relatively good shape at the position, which is why it's fourth. Although they may have to add some veteran depth as they're so young at the position with all the guys 25 and under, having a vet in the room could really help steady the ship come mid-season or if there's any adversity with injuries or anything in the position group. Then, I would say lastly, the cornerback position. For obvious reasons, the Dolphins have invested most of their assets into this position group, and it makes sense. The scheme that Brian Flores was born into, the position that it seems that he loves to coach the most, the one run by Bill Belichick, it's built on the ideas of confusion and manipulating the offense into poor matchups, and this can be done most effectively with a good secondary. Once that's addressed, then the rest of the defense can elevate because the back end is making their lives easier. It's kind of flipped. It's the opposite approach to how the league has been. But think about the fact that the league has also flipped over the last 2 decades as to how it's been played. The offense is dominant now. It's not that defense wins championships. Although, yes, defense wins championships, you need to put up points. It's just the way things are at the end of the day. So it would make sense that playing defense would change as well to oppose that. Scoring has gone up, and the reason for that is passing has gone up. It's been so much easier for quarterbacks to get the ball off. Quarterbacks are protected. It's become more of a 7-on-7 type league. So therefore, you need to change in your defense and defend a 7-on-7 type league and focus on having corners and guys who can run around and make plays on the back end, and then hope that you can create a pass rush in other ways. And so that's why I really do think the Dolphins have created a defense in this scheme to compete with teams like the Chiefs and potentially the Bucs going forward, where you can have guys like Eric Rowe match up with their physical receivers and have a guy like Xavier Howard and Byron Jones match up with their outside guys. So the way that the Dolphins have built their defense seems to be matching up with the modern day NFL offense. So overall, this is how we rank the areas of need on the defensive side of the football. We got linebacker, defensive end, safety, defensive tackle, and then cornerback.
Garoppolo under pressure, wrapped up and thrown down. It's Sieler. Fresh set of downs. Garoppolo is spun down. Elandon Roberts. Another deep drop. Garoppolo in trouble. Van Ginkel with the hit. The ball loose near midfield. Garoppolo arches it for McKinnon, and it's picked off. It's intercepted by Bobby McCain, and down he goes inside the Niner 40-yard line. They're going to keep firing away. Garoppolo too tall, and it's intercepted. This time it's Xavier Howard. Just got it off. Pressure right up the gut, and it's Jerome Baker right in the grill of Beathard. Beathard goes down. Emmanuel Ogbah got in there, and that ball came out loose.
Thank you guys so much for listening. That's going to do it for us here on this Friday edition of the PhinsPod. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for tuning into the episode. As always, we really hope you got something out of the show. Hopefully this look at the roster in a more specific lens is going to give a better idea of where the team should look to improve. And next, we're going to be talking about specific things that the Dolphins can do to improve. We're going to take this list and look at those position groups and see what the Dolphins should do as their plan of attack. And that means looking at free agency and the NFL draft. Please remember to subscribe to the show wherever it is you listen, obviously only if you want, just to never miss a chance to chat about your favorite team, the Miami Dolphins. The show itself is available on all platforms. That's Spotify, Apple and Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, as well as YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube and you're still here, I don't know why you haven't hit subscribe. You got to subscribe. Check out the site as well for news and content, PhinsPod.com. I hope you have an amazing day, and until next time, stay safe. Love y'all.